happiest pod on earth. I'm Stef. I'm an educator who uses passions and fandoms to help my students grow and learn about themselves and the world around them.
And I'm Ariel, a licensed therapist who uses clients' passions and fandoms to help them grow and heal from trauma and mental unwellness.
And I'm Julia Lewald, TV, live action, writer and animation, all that kind of stuff.
And I'm Eric Lewald, same job, same business as my wife. I was the showrunner on X-Men.
And here at Happiest Pod, we dissect Disney mediums with a critical lens. Why? Because we are more than just fans, and we expect more from the mediums we consume. So, what are we here to talk about, everybody?
Well, as everyone heard, we have two exceptional guests on our podcast. Big round of applause and snaps to Eric and Julia Lewald. As they said, they are showrunners, creators of the original X-Men series, and we are so honored to have you on our podcast. As we all know, X-Men and X-Men 97 is a huge, huge part of the Marvel universe and now the extended Disney universe, and we have tons to talk about. So I'm very excited.
Well, thank you for inviting us. This is fun.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, as you already know, we are going to talk about X-Men, and I have seen that you've been going to a lot of conventions, you've been doing free comic book day signings. Does this feel like a resurgence? Does this feel like stepping back into old skin?
It feels surreal.
Understanding with good old X-Men, the animated series, when it wrapped in 1997, there was no social media, there was no Google, there was no internet. We knew at the time that X-Men was a big hit for Fox Kids, but as far as the way it reached people, we had
no clue.
No clue. There was no interaction. We didn't know.
You know, we wrote the scripts at home, and then we go out and we realize we start going to cons in 2017 after we put out a book about the show, and realized there were hundreds of millions of people around the world that saw the show. I mean, it's just crazy. We go to a con and half the cosplayers were doing our show. Yeah. And this was what it was not on the air, and the new show hadn't been announced yet.
Wow. Okay, so this is still feels very sort of shocking and new because you're now getting the fan interaction that you didn't before because the channels weren't there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was just, it wasn't something that was, we started feeling this at the cons well before the new show came out. And so that was all about the initial show. But then the new show, now it's like, you know, we lived with this family 25, 30 years ago, and now the kids have gone off, and now we're living with our grandchildren. You know, it's a strange double whammy.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, how is your family, kind of helping you support the resurgence of your, popularity? Because I'm sure your kids, of course, were probably very small when all of this was happening, and now your grandchildren are part of it. How is your family helping in all of this?
Well, hopefully grandchildren are on their way. But as far
as
this
summer, there are two have been announced.
Yep.
So,
Congratulations.
Our own two, we have two, and nieces and nephews. Our own two were itty bitty. In fact, our second son was born October 8th, and X-Men
came out October 31st of 92.
So they've grown up as, sort of with the show and with that time. So
more recently, when we started going to cons 7 years ago, they and their girlfriends and their friends would come and say at a big con like San Diego, be our support team.
Yes, we need them to help us move boxes and books. So they've been very supportive. Yeah.
I love that. And I mean, the reason why I asked is because I have a lot of students who help out their family businesses. So I was, liking this is the same thing, but just on a different level. And I love how, you can just imagine them helping you out at the Comic-Con booths and, passing out flyers and waiting at the table.
Help out.
Exactly. And I think even going off of the topic of working and family, what is it like working together as a married couple? Because I know that as a marriage and family therapist, it can be difficult for my clients to even cohabitate with each other. They couldn't even imagine spending working time together. So how has that been for the two of you?
And I certainly am aware of that. And I certainly know couples and families that feel that way. But the big difference for me, and I think for Eric, is I'm born in Wisconsin, grew up in Texas, and I clawed my way out to Los Angeles as a young 20-something. and spent 10 years trying to break in as a writer, doing anything and everything. And then the first professional job I got happened to be writing for animation. I'm happy to write for anybody or anything, but it happened to be writing for animation, and it happened to be for the Disney afternoon.
Happened to be next door to me.
And he was in the office next door. So we met when I was doing my passion job. This was all I'd ever wanted to do. And you, the same sort of way, just you writing, you'll, I'll write for you. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I think there are two ways that it doesn't drive us crazier than, and you mentioned about family therapists and people needing time away from each other. One is that our method of work tends to be, we'll sit down at our two workstations in our office, and I'll work for 4 hours and she'll work for 4 hours. We look up and we'll have lunch together, and then we'll go back and we'll just pretty much be in our little cocoons unless we need to discuss something. And that, that's rarely the case. We kind of divvy up the work 50-50. But the upside that I hope you can tell your married clients about is there's a great gift to working in exactly the same job for exactly the same bosses with exactly the same frustrations as your spouse, because it's like having a war buddy.
Yep.
You don't have to explain anything. If I've had a terrible day with the executives at Disney, she's had to deal with the same people the same day and knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's an amazing shorthand there that only comes from shared challenges. Yeah. And getting a show done, in 6 months or whatever is a huge challenge, and you rely on each other and the trust builds. And so it's really, I think the war buddy thing is a gift to a relationship, and I think everybody should try it.
Beautiful. So I'm hearing that there's built empathy and compassion for each other because you directly witness what the other one is having to experience as a struggle. I hear some intentionality even in like the separation of desks, so it allows you to have creative flow. But does it also make it easier for creativity? Like, do you both bounce ideas off of each other during the working day?
We certainly do, but we're in this kind of neither fish nor fowl in that we don't tend to we don't tend to write together. I will write scripts for him as a story editor. He'll write scripts for me as a story editor. He was the showrunner on X-Men. I wrote scripts for him. We will showrun a show together. We will story edit a show together. But that's what we do. That's what I would do anyway. That's what I would do with anybody working on the same show, with the same job. Yeah. Trying to get the same juices flowing.
Yeah, but it's different from writing partners.
Right.
Writing partners, especially let's say in sitcoms or whatever, they'll sit and constantly throw things at each other and they listen, look back and forth and back and forth. And I think we're just both very single-minded in our writing. And here's 8 hours worth of stuff. Have a look. If you see anything you don't like, tell me, and vice versa. And so it's not at all it's not Abbott and Costello. It's two separate people that are working on the same project. Now, in that way, there isn't a lot of continual hour after hour after hour stress. There's just occasionally looking over each other's work and adding to it or questioning it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I'm getting chills because as I'm watching you two, I just see Scott and Jean right behind you. And I'm like, would this be how Cyclops and Jean just do their everyday X-Men stuff? I mean, because they have two distinct roles in the team, but yet
very different.
They come together and they spearhead a lot of these missions, and they are pretty much the ones to kind of collaborate. And I love that. So I'm getting chills. Yeah, I mean, on top of that, we know that we've talked about how the impact of X-Men has been so much more broad than we can ever imagine. I know for myself, me and Ariel, we watched the show when we were younger, and we dressed up as characters throughout Halloweens. And now that we are older, I have children of my own. My son's like, he's 4 years old, and he's like, X-Men? I like X-Men, because he sees me and my husband watch it every single week. And there's so many different levels of themes and character depth. How do you feel about the show's legacy in shaping that representation, and even some of the really hard topics of social justice and having those really hard discussions?
First off, just to, again, lay the groundwork, X-Men the Animated Series only exists because of 30 years of X-Men books. that
Started in '63. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby started it, and then lots of other writers and artists continued. So they set up this really solid world to tell stories in. I mean, what a perfect setup! You've got people that are special, but special in a scary way that it's not unreasonable for the people around them to see them as different and frightening at the same time. So, you know, not all these people that are reacting against the main characters are being unreasonable. It's an unusual situation full of fun and spectacle. And so that we were given that wonderful setup. The thing I think small thing we can take credit for is if you look back at the early books, the first 20 years of the books, it breaks down into a couple, like two basic types. One is kind of a WWE professional wrestling, you know, oh, we've got more power. No, we've got more power. No, it's the Hulk. No, it's the Thing. Who's gonna overpower who by the end of the comic book? So there's that, which is kind of a natural, fun thing that kids like to see. You know, who's gonna beat who and why. But the other half of it is this group of people, most of whom are kind of rejects or orphans or loners or don't feel like they fit in, and and they know they're different from the society around them, and they have a found family.
Yes.
And we found that side of the writing much more interesting, just because the other one's kind of one note. It's kind of like shootouts in a Western. In the best action movies, it's all about the characters and their personal lives. It's not about the spectacle. So we bent the stories a little towards the half of the books that looked into their mutancy. And that, again, it's kind of a gift to us. And we didn't really have a political or gender or any agenda. It's just, that's where all the drama is. So we're very practical people. We're frantically trying to get 13 scripts thought out, written and finished in 5 months. And so we look for where the character moments and the drama is, and it happens to be at the center of our lead characters. And that's why when we picked the characters, we're very careful. There had been 29 people that had been X-Men up until that point, up until 92. And we looked for as varying a cast, as diverse a cast as we could get, not out of ideology, but out of making the writing easy and making the writing more effective. Because if you've got 6 big gruff guys sitting around a living room, you know, who are you going to give the line to? We wanted everybody to be as distinct from the others as possible. When the smoke cleared, that meant, you know, 4 men, 4 women, and with various backgrounds and personalities. And that was, again, a case of self-interest, because that made the writing easier, quicker, and more satisfying for us.
And anyone who has survived puberty and adolescence has felt their own body go through bizarre changes. And the fact that in X-Men, the tick is that when you hit puberty or adolescence, you may have a mutation that you don't know about, your family doesn't know about, no one understands that you may have that. And it could turn out to be devastating, good, bad, scary, but you don't know. And I think what an allegory for, like I said, anybody who's ever gone through adolescence and puberty, but also what an opportunity to explore those feelings of disconnect, of change, of being othered, of finding folks afraid of you just because you are who you are, or finding folks who don't like you just because you are who you are. Amazing in terms of what stories you can tell with that and how you can represent things with that.
I think so many episodes or shows actually in the 90s honed in on adolescence, and X-Men was such a great amplification of that through such fantastical means. I think that X-Men itself is so perfect to use in middle school, high school settings, because everyone's going through these things in different stages, in different ways. And the X-Men really are so great at defining that because they are so different. I'm curious to know, was there any precedent that, you know, Marvel gave you before giving you, you know, creative freedom as to, you know, stay within these boundaries or, you know, have creative freedom on this? Because like you said, there is so much content to really dive deep into.
We were really lucky.
Again, 1992, no social media,
No internet, no Google,
Marvel,
no Wikipedia.
Marvel Comics Marvel was based out of New York City. Production was happening in Los Angeles. 2:30 on a Friday, everything shut down, and you couldn't recommunicate until Monday.
But the nice thing was, Marvel was small and struggling financially, and we're focused. I mean, the poor guy running the X books, Bob Harris, who was our primary creative advisor, he had an 80-hour job just getting the X books out. So he would, give what attention he could to what we were doing and be supportive and give us notes and thoughts. Marvel this is so odd now in 2024. They were so small and weak and just thankful that someone was putting out one of their properties on the air that they had no final say in anything. It was a Fox show. And if Marvel hated a story, which, 3 or 4 of the ones that we got through, they really didn't like, we just had to shrug and say, I'm sorry, but the folks here like it and we're going forward with it. We'll try to listen to you. But, so it wasn't their baby, and there really wasn't oversight other than they really asked that we try to be true to the characters and the tone and the history of the books. But as Bob said, when the first day I met him, he said, look, we've got 4 different, there have been 25 years of this. We have 4 books going. They have all these different timelines and all these different people switching from good to bad and who knows in the middle. You pick your own way to focus these stories, because if you try to stick with canon or try to, you're going to drive yourself crazy. So it's you guys' story, you have different needs for a TV show than we have for comic books. Write your own stories, do your own thing, and we'll try to be supportive. And that was this incredible gift because, A, there was no sense of micromanagement. There was no sense of frustration and fighting against the original authors. We would come up with original stories and then go back through the books or reference materials and try to populate them with characters that fit our stories so that people that are fans of the books would say, oh, there's this character, there's that character, and they'd feel that we're working within their world. We tried never to make up a new character if there was one to be found in the books.
And I'm curious, it almost sounds like it could be a full circle because now you're consulting. As opposed to talking to somebody to consult, you are consulting. So what has that shift or experience been like being on that?
Well, the fact that X-Men 97 is even happening
is wonderful.
Is insane. Look,
it's surreal.
Yes.
But you're exactly right. The one person that had some suggestions for our original show that were different from the direction we wanted to go was Stan Lee. There's Stan, all bursting with energy, full of life, always creative, but always wanting to have it be his show. And it was a very different show. The X-Men he wrote in 1963 was they were teenagers. It was all guys, and they had a gene like
they had Marvel Girl.
It was like 6 Smurfs and a Smurfette, and they were wisecracking teenagers, and it was a very different mood. The book went out of print, and when it came back in the mid-'70s with Len Wein and Chris Claremont, suddenly the new characters were older, they were international, they were a bit more world-weary and darker. I guess this was post-Vietnam. It was enough had happened in the culture that it was a very different X-Men, and everyone agreed at the beginning. All Marvel and everyone said, okay, you're going to be doing the darker, older, later X-Men. But Stan didn't want to hear that because the one he knew were the bumptious teenagers. So the point was he was 69 at the time and was trying to give us some consulting on the show. And I'm 69 now and trying to give some consulting to the new guys. So I was painfully aware that if I didn't watch my stuff, I could be that much out of step with what the new guys were trying to do. I didn't want to be the curmudgeon that was wagging his finger. Well, my day, this is the way we did it. So we were just really absolutely supportive. And there was none of that challenge. The people doing the new show very much wanted it to be a continuation, had the same tone and the same people and the same focuses that we had. So there was no, culture gap that we'd had to withstand.
It's just amazing. In Hollywood, you never get invited back to the party. It's kind of how it works. And we've known friends who worked on shows that have been rebooted, reimagined, re-envisioned, retooled. Okay, well, that was bye. But the fact that the two of us and Larry Houston are on board as consulting producers, it still blows my mind. And the fact that they are doing season 6 of X-Men the Animated Series.
In effect,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the continuation. It was such a great decision because the last 5 or 6 years we've been going to cons, and every other fan would come up, are they going to do a new series? And if so, are they going to ruin it? Are they
Yep, that's always the same question.
I want it to be the same. I want it to be the same but new.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that they did that. They made it the same but new, and that's hard. I think it's harder than what we did. We had low expectations. People out here, the entire creative cast was let go after the first 13 because they didn't think it was going to be successful.
Right. So the fact that it out of the gate just blew up Fox Kids TV's ratings. Coming back for season 2. Okay, we'll try 13 more episodes. And then we'll give you so each season of X-Men the Animated Series was with an eye toward this is the only 13 we're going to get. Whereas I do believe X-Men 97 they have announced that
They've announced 3 seasons.
3 seasons. Yes. Yeah, already. That's a wonderful sort of bit of
it's a good thing for them.
Good cushion. Good, nice making of a great big box to play in.
Yeah, we do freelance gig work out here, and so getting another season of something guaranteed is really helpful with the overhead, with little children, without paying for the kids and everything.
Yeah, my partner's a Teamster, so it's as long as something is shooting, and we're always wanting a series. Sometimes it's a film. He does a lot of the Hallmark Christmas movies, so I will get lots of pictures of fake snow in July.
Oh my God, that's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems that because you mentioned you were, kind of just seeing where the next season would go back then in, the first series, did that kind of contribute to the nervousness and also maybe just saying we're going to give it all we've got because we don't know if we're going to be renewed again? Like, do you think that played a little bit in, kind of just not just the creative process, but the way that you were, writing? Was it, any at all impactful?
Oh, yeah.
Because of the timeline. Yeah.
Definitely those first 13 and the next 13, because you just don't know if it's going to go beyond that. And you, as a story editor, he got 13 episodes each time. So that's like, oh, yay. As a writer, I got an episode each season, and it's like, well, that's yay, But the approach, it was definitely, this may be it. This might be it.
And designing so that at the end of 13 and at the end of 26, there could feel like a bit of a resolution, not necessarily a perfect ending, but that part of the story arc has been resolved. And if we don't get more, people won't feel weird like they were left with the cliffhanger.
Yeah. Hopefully.
And also the artists, Larry always talks about that.
Larry Houston, yes.
It's a weird combination. On the artist side, really, all of them were crazy X-Men fans that had read every book since they were 6 years old. And on the writing side, most of us had never read the X-Men. The night before I got the job, I got a call saying, you're going to be doing the X-Men. And I said, well, that's a Marvel book, right?
Because you had been hired to do a different show, but we found out that was all subterfuge. They didn't want
the world to know that there's going to be an X-Men show.
So you were expecting to walk in Monday morning to start working on show A. And instead, Sunday night, you get a call and you're told, it's going to be X-Men.
You're going to meet all the Marvel people in the morning.
And Stanley.
And so I said, shut up, and just get through them and nod and say, oh, yes, you're going to do a wonderful job, and we'll do this thing. But just so that was an interesting combination. The artists really knew the books. They were very helpful to us. And they were the one, Larry always mentions, he said, I thought we were only going to get 13. I crammed everything I could into every episode, mutants in the background, the Easter eggs, cameo appearances. So good. And they just hope that we get more. But yeah, for him, since he was a fanboy, he wanted to see everything he could of that world in that first season. Yeah. And once we got more, he was a little more relaxed, but he never lost the desire to put more and more and more and more of the world he knew into the stories. And you have to be careful about that. There's a 22-minute story. There's not room for to develop more than 3 or 4 characters in the course of the story. But as far as the background goes, where the artists have their fun, that's wide open. They could go crazy with that if they want, and they did.
Well, I'm curious, because we're reflecting on that creative process, some of the desires and wants and the way things sort of unfolded. How has the industry changed? Like, animation has definitely changed. Is there quicker turnaround even? I know that, like, even with social media, like, it's hard to keep things private. It's hard to keep things confidential, to keep things on hush, even though there's so many contracts in place. So I'm curious, like, in what ways have things been different, not just consulting?
We had no pressure. There was no social media for the original with hundreds of thousands of people wanting to know what we were doing with our stories. There was zero of that. We could just write what we wanted, and so that pressure wasn't there.
Now, with what's happening now in our capacity, they invited us and said to come on board, say we want the 3 of us to be our first audience, meaning we got to see every script, and in the year 20, whatever it is now, all these animatics, which is animatics they're not brand new, but considering everything years ago, we didn't have
enough money.
Oh yeah,
You're talking about the time, because computer animation is much quicker than hand painted.
Oh yeah,
the hundreds of thousands of hand painted cells per episode that had to be made. So it would take about 9 months from the time we said, we're going to do a Beast story where he falls in love with the blind girl, to the time where we'd see the final product. It would be about 9 months.
Right.
And that, it was like 5 or 6 weeks to get the script locked, then about another 6 weeks to get the storyboard locked, which was 900 or 1,000 images.
And all the model sheets,
and all the material gets sent overseas, and it'd be 4 or 5 months of animation. And then finally, we'd get to see what we'd imagined 9 months earlier. Nowadays, of course, everything is it's computerized. Everybody can see everything online. But interestingly, we finished, as I said, we had about 5 months of when we finished our first 13 episodes writing. And these guys had 3 years to get the first 10. And we were a little envious that they could, redo things or fix things. We didn't have time to fix mistakes. But at the same time, it was a gift to us that we were under this intense time pressure, because it was just, we'd write a draft, it would go into production. We'd write a draft, it would go into production. There wasn't second thinking. Why don't we throw that one out and try a slightly different take on that script? Give me a different 40 pages, which we had experienced some at Disney, where there wasn't the deadlines and they had incredibly deep pockets. Right. So I remember literally doing 8 outlines for a script, a show there. I can't remember which one, but by outline 5, I've given them everything that I can imagine, and I'm just repeating myself. Guys, just make a decision. So there's a joyful decisiveness and energy to having these tough deadlines, like we're having, like it's a weekly magazine.
Yes.
And a boom, boom, boom. You're like a journalist. You get it done, and you hope that your first instincts were good, and that it didn't need another month of pondering to come to a good story. But that was, as I say, looking back, however stressful it was to be under that time crunch, it was a real gift, because exactly what we imagined and ended up on screen. Yeah. They didn't have time to change anything.
Yeah. We just talked about slowing things down versus speeding things up in, the world before and the world now. I know a lot of students, especially now, they're so used to getting everything at lightning speed. If they're going to watch a show, they're getting all 10 episodes just dumped on them, and they can watch and binge the entire thing. As a showrunner and a writer, do you think it was very helpful that Disney Plus decided to release one a week?
As of last Wednesday, anyone can binge it. It's there. All 10 episodes are available to you. But for those 10 weeks when they were releasing it one at a time, that was a kind of magical throwback to the original X-Men series, where you had to be there Saturday morning, or you had to catch it after school, on Fox Kids on a Tuesday. And that gave you time to have the episode to absorb the episode, to
and
have
talk to your friends about it.
Yeah, to give you time to think about it, saying, no, they didn't do that. They couldn't do that. They did that. What's that going to mean? To have that kind of conversation, especially with friends and fans, that's exciting. That's wonderful. And again, everybody else now can binge it all they want, but having it released one at a time, I thought was very, very smart. I mean, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the excitement it created.
It's such a different world now. I mean, you remember when you were little, there were 3 networks and Fox was just this new one starting out. There weren't that many choices. And if something was really popular, half your friends at school would have seen the thing. And on Monday, you'd be talking about it. And then you'd be asking each other, you'd be looking forward to the next weekend, versus now, if something's really popular, maybe 3 or 4% of the kids. So, 2 of the kids in your class instead of 20 of them will have seen it. And it's just not this common culture center that it would, it's fun. It's hard thinking back and explaining to our kids what it was like where there was a common culture all around the country and the world eventually, because it showed everywhere. That everybody knew what you're talking about when you're talking about the X-Men. The closest thing with our kids when they were younger was Pokemon. It became a worldwide craze. And they'd wear Pokemon shirts, and we'd be in airports, and foreign kids would rush up to them, and they'd start talking Pikachu at each other.
My dad was in the military. He was in the Navy. We moved around a lot. Steph knows this from the podcast and us being friends. And we moved to Guam right when X-Men was in its final season. And we lived on the military base. And so I would get all of the episodes at least 2 weeks later because of the way the military base has for streaming, right? They're what you could actually watch. And so I didn't even know it was ending until way later. And I didn't have anybody to sort of talk about it to on the internet. And so I didn't have a heads up. And then it was just shifting to different programming after that. And I thought it was it's because I'm on the base. They just don't have the new seasons yet. They don't have access to that. And we came back to the States and it's no, it's over.
It ended for everyone.
It ended for everyone. Yes. And then now with the resurgence, it's I've been having conversations with my friends and my roommates. Some different things here, I don't know if maybe, and please correct me if I just was a kid and didn't pay attention, that I don't remember the intro changing. I remember the intro being the same and only a few seasoned episodes having a special thing. Is that my childlike memory, pushing everything together?
Because in X-Men 97, they change up the intro a little each time.
Which I think is fabulous.
Which is kind of cool, depending on who's going to be the main person in the, which would have been way too expensive for us.
And Larry Houston is back doing the new intro for the show.
Yeah, so the guy that did our intro is supervising their intro. What happened is, I think the first 65 episodes, so the first, in effect, 5 seasons, which we all thought was going to be the finale. It was the same group of people. It was the same executives. It was the opening didn't change at all.
Okay.
Nothing changed. Yeah. But that last season, when the animation looked so thin, Margaret Lesh, whose baby this is, the reason it's on the air is because of her, president of Fox Kids. Mm-hmm. Before those last 11 were missioned and produced, she was eased out there at Fox, and new people came on, and they cut the budget in half. Yeah. And I think they changed the music a little and changed the opening a little. I think simply financially, because they make more money, or they'd have rights to the new season where they didn't have rights to the old season. So those kind of adjustments were not creative adjustments. They were like the cheapened animation. It wasn't because the new director wanted it to look cheaper. It was the money was taken away. Mm-hmm. And so those last 11 were like a different little category of things. The writers were the same, and we didn't have to change our writing. Everything in the production, our main director, our main video editor, everything about it, again, the main executive that was overseeing it at Fox, all were gone. And it was kind of an afterthought. Yeah. We were prepared to take another job because, in fact, Beyond Good and Evil, the big 4-parter, was supposed to be the ending of the series. Yeah. And then suddenly we get this call saying, oh, no, we're going to do a few more. And we couldn't say no, but we lost a lot of the creative people and executives for that season. And it's hard to explain to fans why it looked different and why it sounded a little different. And it's a practical thing in Hollywood. I understand it's not unusual. I think it happened to Star Trek. Their last half season, the budget was cut by a third. Well, what do? Do you finish? Do you walk away in a huff, or do you keep working? So.
Yeah. And I remember seeing those nuances, not in X-Men, but in another show that I loved, which was Sailor Moon. I was noticing that their animation style changed, kind of in the second and third season. And as a kid, you don't think twice of that. But as you're analyzing it as an adult, you're like, something must have happened. And it's very interesting. I mean, I'm just happy that you all decided to push through and was like, you know what, we're just going to finish what we started. And that just totally just speaks to the integrity and the passion that you have for the series. And, as we're looking back and looking forward also, what hopes and goals do you have for the continuing seasons regarding its cultural, educational, just global impact now that we have the lens to see how the world is reacting to it? Are there any sort of goals that you have in mind that you haven't achieved already?
Well, if there were any goals for X-Men 97, they'd probably be the same ones we had for X-Men the Animated Series, which would be, come on, people, let's be nice. Let's not just randomly
okay, so
hate.
Xavier. Xavier's dream.
And here we are 30 years later, and good God, the world's hair continues to be on fire. Again, we frozen in time, X-Men went off the air 97, and 25 years later, we can go back and talk about where the world was at that time, and it was ugly. And here we are now, and good God, it is ugly. But there has been great progress and great good things that have happened, but it's not easy to remember that, to realize that in the face of all the ugly. So can we just appreciate each other's differences instead of automatically hate them?
I mean, it's the same kind of story. The top writer for me was a friend from college, Mark Edens, and I mean, Mark's degree was in the classics, as in Homer. And we'd sit down and talk. I said, the stories are the same, people are the same, the crises are the same, the loyalties and the backstabbings and the trust and the love. It's fix, improve, but human nature is human nature. And we look back in the 90s, and it was Rodney King trial, the LA riots, and the AIDS epidemic
that we couldn't use.
That you couldn't even say the word out loud. No politician on the planet, Republican or Democrat, could come out in favor of gay marriage. My God, that'd be the end of his career.
His career,
His career, right. So, and I look back to when I was a kid in the 60s, when we both fell in love with Star Trek, the original Star Trek. A third of the people I knew, were the families were disowning them because their politics were different and the religions were different, and the culture was cracking apart. So this stuff is part of our evolution, and we hope like Xavier. We've got Xavier, the idealist, that's still full of hope. But in the end, if you notice, we can't tell Magneto to shut up. We can't say, you're a villain, you're wrong, and my favorite part of writing X-Men was deciding to focus on the fact that these two people with completely different ideologies it was a bromance, that they were the best friends. They were like a married couple. That was a central part of them struggling through life, doing what they both felt was important.
Yeah, I think you're really touching on the fact that, humans have patterns. We tend to repeat them, right? We repeat history. I also think that there's a line in one of the episodes from the animated series where Storm is like, a skin-based prejudice, how quaint.
No, skin-based prejudice, that's so pathetic, it's almost quaint.
It's almost quaint, yes.
Quaint, But that was a result of traveling back in time.
To the 50s.
To the 50s. Yes. And, you can look at that through the lens. If you're a kid watching the show, you don't even catch it. You're just going, these people, they're kind of punky and they came back in the past.
And they didn't like Storm because she was black. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know why that, but she looks like a weird person, so that must be it. And then as you get up, no, it's because, different skin color with Bishop and Shard. And oh my God, that's what the show was talking about.
By the way, that was my favorite episode ever was One Man's Worth.
The two-parter.
It's a two-parter where they go back. And the 3 or 4 reasons, but the hardest part of my job, we had wonderful people writing, including my dear wife. And so once we had come up with a good, really solid kernel for a story idea out of the thousands we could have told and convinced everybody that it was a good story, Marvel and Fox and whoever. And our wonderful censor, Avery Coburn, who had to approve everything. Then handing it off to one of the writers, I knew I'd end up a month later with something really pretty good. But coming up with a different but consistent story 76 times was the hardest part. And so when one would come to you and say, oh my God, that's a perfect X-Men story. That would happen about once every 6 months.
Yeah.
that I have one about. And One Man's Worth was that to me. It was like, we both loved It's a Wonderful Life. We both loved the Star Trek episode, City on the Edge of Forever.
Yes.
And each of them, the core idea is one person makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
And look, all of history,
So Eric came up with that idea and expanded it out and pitched it to Bob Harris at Marvel Comics.
And Bob loved it.
Bob loved it. That's a really good idea. And so I'll share with you that Marvel took that and that spun into the Age of Apocalypse series for them.
Wow.
But the original idea was Eric's One Man's Worth for the TV show. Now, TV animation has a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and time travel stories are tricky. So
that one took us months to get everybody to sign off on. Okay, then they go travel in the future, and then the past, and the future, and the past, and yeah.
But so by the time it got to the storyboard stage, the folks at Marvel Comics had already
drawing. We're drawing bits for Age of Apocalypse, and so we used some of their drawing in our show
in those episodes. And
so it went back and forth.
Yeah. But so people assume that's where One Man's Worth came from. But I'm telling you, that's where Age of Apocalypse came from. It came from One Man's Worth. So that's just one of those. But you often say very generously, we're here because of X-Men, the books, and the fact that something like that you created was able to contribute to the books themselves. It
was nice to be able to give it back because we took so many highlights from what they'd done over 30 years and used them for our own stories. The fact that they could take this nugget from us and build something special for them, that was very gratifying.
Yeah.
Okay, and spoiler alert, this is my spoiler alert for anybody who has not finished watching X-Men 97. This is your chance to pause and come back at this exact timestamp. This is, again, another full circle thing because it looks like we're doing time travel again. And interestingly enough, in connection with like Disney and the multiverse, this might even be an opportunity for multiversing. Plus, there's time traveling because it's still taking place technically in 1997.
Yeah.
You caught that, did you?
Yeah.
Hey, no, the fact that I got to write Days of Future Past Part 1 for season 1 of the two-parter, which introduced Bishop. And I think that was the first time travel episode in the series. If used sparingly, it's such a great way to sort of expand out on a story. Now, we can you're saying the multiverse, and we can also time travel, but good old Morph in the two-part opener, he was supposed to stay dead. And he stayed dead for the first 13 episodes. And that was thanks to Margaret Lesh, thanks to Avery Coburn.
Allowing us to have a lead character have a heroic sacrifice.
That's what it was. It was heroic to prove that the stakes are real, to prove that things have consequences. Then when you got tapped to come back for season 2 of X-Men, and it's like, it's a big hit. We'd like you to come back. Yay.
With one problem.
We had a focus group with a bunch of 9-year-olds and asked them who their favorite character was from that first season. Morph won by a landslide. It's like,
so is there any way you can bring him back, please?
But you'll notice he doesn't come back through time travel. He comes back as a result of Mr. Sinister pulling him aside and really messing with him.
Thank goodness, because one of the many restrictions placed upon us by the censor was saying that if he is killed, it has to be off screen. And so
Right.
that gave us this opening to have him. Well, so he was. So something. Sentinels blasted him, and everybody felt like he was dead.
Yeah.
And which was an incredibly intense moment, and most of the fans bring up to us. But if we wanted to bring him back, we could say something happened very quickly off screen and explain that Mr. Sinister had been up to it. But we hadn't planned that whole Sinister thing. That was a way to bring Morph back. So that's the reason that the whole second season started that way, was because we needed an elaborate excuse for bringing back to life somebody that we had really were sure was dead.
And it wasn't time travel.
It wasn't time travel.
Yeah, leave it to the 9-year-olds to really lay it on the execs, and they can be as truthful as possible. I mean, to be fair, watching Gambit made me feel like a 9-year-old, and I felt that same lump in my throat watching it. And I, as a mother of 2 very young kids, I watch X-Men 97 on my phone after the kids have gone to sleep, because I cannot turn on a TV without them being like, "Mommy, what are you watching?" So
Sure.
here I am in my feelings, just like, oh my goodness, what is happening? So I'm glad that you were dedicated to that, because that impact makes the show, the characters, so real and so visceral.
Yes.
There's all kinds of, as the joke is, there's all kinds of yellow spandex and big things blowing up. But everything about X-Men is about the character. It's about the individual character. And each of the individual X-Men, and it's a large team once you start trying to write for everybody. Each of them has his or her own genuine sorrow. I often say, if Rogue and Wolverine could swap powers, they'd both be really happy. He would not touch people and he'd go live in the woods. He'd be fine.
Yes.
She could touch people but not have to skewer them. She'd be fine. So the thing that defines each of them as their own kind of most amazing mutant is each one of them their own greatest personal sorrow, and
that weighs on
them. And I think you can say the same thing. You can say that about all of them, including good old Scott Summers Cyclops, the most clear-eyed, forward-thinking. He can't take off his glasses. He can't. There's something always between him and you. I mean, any one of them, you can say that you can pull it apart like that. So yeah.
I think even like Stefan, you talking about your son. Right. We're talking about layers of acceptance. He's only 4 and he already felt the world say that he can't do something because he's too small. And that was so heartbreaking. He couldn't get on a ride at Universal.
Not allowed.
On his birthday.
On his birthday, he was 1 inch too short to ride the Mario Kart ride. And he was the sorrow and devastation. You know your kid's cries, and the cry that he had was something that I'm not used to seeing every day. So those are real emotions and, real things, and just pausing to acknowledge that that's a real thing. And, even though we can just embrace those feelings, we can always look forward to, what's to come. That just makes us strong. There's so many learning points in X-Men, which I love so much, because as an educator, we can pull so much as a mirror for a lot of these kids to just look at themselves and their struggles and how they can, not make certain mistakes, and how they can process it in the way that is right for them. The way that we're speaking through our own personal experiences and the people we work with, we really are grateful for the love and dedication that you have for the series, because it shows. Yes. It absolutely shows.
It remains one of our favorite, if not our favorite jobs, and we've worked on a lot of shows, but for those years before we started, prior to 2017, it held a special place in our hearts and we were dedicated to it, but the rights had fallen apart and had been sold off piecemeal.
Yes.
And there was no sort of general celebration of X-Men like there were celebrations of Batman, the animated series. Or Star Trek with Paramount. And I really thought we were like wandering around in the woods just shouting, "Anyone remember X-Men?" And so for those years when it was kind of just us on our own going, "Anyone remember?" To be able to come in in 2017, 2018 and sort of discover that for ourselves, that there are people out there who embraced it and continue to embrace it. That's been spectacular. That really has been.
Before we close out, I would just like one sentence each from you. What advice would you give aspiring writers and creators who are inspired by, your journey?
Okay, this thing here and the thing that we're communicating with, This was Star Trek level magic back when I was trying to claw my way in. And Larry Houston at conventions, anywhere a young artist comes up to him, I said, "Did you have a chance to draw something today? Did you get out a pencil or a pen and just doodle on some paper?" And if you want to be a writer, you are a writer. But you gotta put it on. You gotta put it down. You gotta put it on paper, or you gotta put it on a screen.
Finish things and show it to people. It's hard.
It doesn't have to be a whole novel. It can be a comedy sketch. It can be a monologue. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it's a muscle you have to work. And you have so many opportunities now to let other folks see what your art is, see what your craft is. You can have your own, YouTube site. You can have your own web page for that matter. Don't wake up and say, "I have to write 200 pages today." Or if that works for you, do it. But don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. To do what we do, this is more than one sentence, but
It's okay. It's good.
they're writing, at least for projects, let's say in Hollywood, there are a lot of different cubby holes that writing can fall into. You got live action, you got animation, you got new media, you got all these different, and within that, you got hour length
games,
you got video games, you got, and then you got audio, you got hour length, you got half hour, you got dramedy, you got comedy, you got drama, you got and each one of those has a kind of specific sort of script format. I can say that. So if there's something you want to write, find out what else is happening in that arena. Get your hands on as many scripts as you can to see what those scripts look like. And you are already farther ahead than I was when I first drove out here, because that kind of access was not available.
I'll give you two real quick examples. I mean, the sentence is, if you want to write, just do it as much as you can. You're just going to get better.
Yes.
And don't worry about it. Don't worry about it being bad. Almost everybody's, the Shakespeare stuff you read is probably starting in his 12th year. It's not the stuff he started in high school. It's, the early stuff was a struggle and he was finding his voice or whatever. Just write and write and write and write. If you write or if you draw, when an opportunity arises, like the day I got a call, my neighbor out here, they're hiring new writers at Hanna-Barbera because they got a huge order for new scripts. He said, do you have something I can show to my boss? I said, well, yeah, I've got about 10 years worth of it here, a few thousand pages worth. What do you need specifically? Okay, it can't be too long. Okay, it needs to be short. It needs to be funny. It doesn't necessarily need to be animation. Okay, so the 2-hour film noir goes over here, and the 1-hour drama goes over here, and the miniseries goes over here. Okay, and I dig out one of 2 little short sitcom scripts I'd written. He got it into the head of Hanna-Barbera. She probably read 3 pages. Thought, well, this guy's okay. We will let him pitch to us. But that one magic moment where somebody read 3 pages of what I'd written, out of all that I'd written over 10 years, it took the 10 years of writing to get good enough that those 3 pages got me into a job. And so you have to keep doing it, even if you have perhaps no immediate hope other than a naive hope, imagination that what you're doing is going to get produced. Yeah. That's not why you do it. You do it because you love to write the story.
And also network among your friends, network among your support team. His neighbor knew he was a writer wanting to break into writing more, and an opportunity came up, and the neighbor let you know. I had several friends. They invited me to join a softball team. I am not a softball team person, but it was a fun summer. But one of my friends introduced me to one of her friends who at that time had already been working at Disney. You want to write? You want to write? Well, we do animation over here. You want to? Yeah, yes, please. Yes, please, and thank you. So let folks know if that's what you aspire to,
and be flexible.
Be very flexible.
Because neither one of us imagined at all that we'd write for animation when we came out here at all. Okay. Movies. She loved
live action, half-hour comedy. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it just happened that the first 2 jobs that became available were that, and we discovered that it was something we had a feel for and that we were good at. That was hearing a lot of advice columnists recently saying, following your passion can get you into trouble, because you could have a passion for being, one of the 4 people that writes for Stephen Colbert, and there are only 4 of those jobs available. Try 100 different things and find something you're really good at. The people, hey, that was really funny. I mean, now with cell phones, you can do a movie on your iPhone. try stuff, show it to people, let it crash and burn 7 or 8 times, but you find something, you're good at that. Then it can become your passion, becomes something that people want to pay you for and give you a job.
And in the kind of writing that you and I each do, realize too, it is very collaborative. You can, I loved to write poetry. I loved to write, short pieces, years ago. And that's what I'm saying. There are a lot of people you have to work with in the production of a thing. So be prepared.
Be prepared to be a diplomat and come up with third alternatives, which where you thought something was absolutely perfect, and the other person says, "Well, I can't live with that. I've got this other idea, and you can't live with that." And you sit down and you negotiate, and you find the perfect thing in the middle that might even be better than the first thought you had. So be prepared to listen and revise the people you're working with, because the joy of writing poetry for yourself, that's a single thing. Nobody's giving you notes on it. But the idea that you're a professional writer and people are paying you lots of money
people are paying you money.
Are paying you a living wage to write stories, which is a pretty amazing thing.
That is amazing.
You need to respect the fact that, they have an ear too, and it's their money, or it's their network, or it's their artwork, and you need to come together and find the alternative that makes you all happy. That is a learned skill, and there's some wonderful writers that never learn it. It's fine. They can publish on their own. They can self-publish, and that's cool.
And you can. Yes, that's available now to people.
A place like Hollywood is so collaborative. It's scary, and the people that do best are the ones that listen best, and teamwork. And it's tough on your ego sometimes, and you have to see your stuff left out that you thought was your best stuff.
Gold.
But the next morning, you're still getting paid to write stories.
Okay, so Stef, I think what I heard, and let me know if this is what you heard, consistency, just making it a regular practice to write or draw, whatever creative endeavor, it does involve practice, some purposeful practice. I'm hearing networking, and networking isn't just with strangers. You need to tell your friends and your family. You need to let everyone know this is a thing that I want to do, and here's what it looks like. I think I'm also hearing preparedness, and preparedness means if you've been practicing, you have something to give. It also means prepare yourself to receive feedback and prepare yourself to have collaboration. So be willing to have that flexibility. Is that what you heard?
Flexibility. We say in the education world, know when to step back and know when to step forward. And I think being able to have that flexibility just opens up more doors to you. And even though some of those doors close, it's not the end of the world, which is part of the compatibility. But thank you so much for your wisdom, so much of your insight. This has been such an amazing talk. I wish it could last forever, but I know we have things to do today. But, like I said earlier, it is such an honor to have you both and have all of the years of your expertise and just you grinding it out, because it really does translate into our professions too.
Yes.
Yes,
it does.
I've taken a lot of nuggets.
Amazing.
I'm sure our listeners will. And hopefully we will see you at maybe Comic-Con if you'll be there next, because I know we will be, or wherever else you may be.
LA Con in October, if you come by LA Con.
Minnesota, of all places, and that'll be.
Don't you know?
My God, here you go, girl.
The uncanny experience. They have a unique thing where it's a totally X-Men thing, and they rent out a 7-story old 1908 gentleman's club and turn it into the X-Mansion.
Last year was their premiere event, and we got to attend that, and it was amazing, and they're doing it again. So if anybody,
we will be back.
It was remarkable. It was really remarkable. So yeah, those two things for sure.
Was it? Can we say uncanny?
It was, and it was an experience. It was an uncanny experience.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the episode. We really appreciate having both of you. Well, listeners, if you would like to connect with Eric and Julia, you can find them at xmentas.com. That is also their Instagram handle, xmentas. So go ahead and DM them, show all the love.
If you're loving it, we can share love.
Share all the love. DM us and let us know about your thoughts of the animated series and if, your your thoughts on how to use X-Men in educational and therapeutic settings, please DM us at Happiest Pod GT, both Twitter and Instagram. I guess Twitter's named X now, so we can say X-Men Twitter.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steph.